This week, Georgia Southern will head to the Lone Star State to take on the Texas State Bobcats, and we get to welcome in one of our good friends from San Marcos, is Brant Freeman. Joining us, he'll have the call on ESPN Plus this week. Brant, appreciate you joining us.
Guys, it's always a pleasure getting a chance to talk with you two, and it has been way too long since you guys have last been in San Marcos. It's been 3 years for football, and this will be the first Saturday Georgia Southern will have been in San Marcos since 2014.
Wow. Danny and I were asking a very pertinent question.
Always.
What time does Black's Barbecue open?
10.
Ooh.
Do they do a brisket omelet by any chance?
Sorry, my man. They don't do that, but they do just about anything else.
Brent, take us into what this Texas State team has been like this year. 3-6, 2-3 in conference play, coming off a big victory against ULM this past week. What is kind of the mood around this team? It's kind of been a really good win for this team, and then following up with a game that you would like to forget. But what is kind of this team looking like?
It's been a disappointing year, certainly, as the record would indicate. You look at Jake Spavital's tenure at Texas State. The first year, was kind of the beginning of his take on the rebuild. They won 3 games that year, but the losses weren't all that competitive, and they were kind of lucky to get some of those wins. But then year 2, there were fewer wins, 1 fewer, but there was progress. The losses were competitive, to include the loss to Statesboro, a very tight game, played over there. Paulson, they arguably should have beaten UTSA. They could have won the game against Georgia Southern if one more break went their way. There were some other competitive games along the way that gave you a good feeling going into 2021, especially a come from behind win over Arkansas State, and really kind of felt like they were in a good place going into 2021. And the way the season began, very competitive against Baylor. It was really a one-possession game. Don't let the 9-point deficit fool you. There was a wild safety play at the end that made the score look more cosmetic in Baylor's favor. The win at FIU, not that FIU is a good team, but winning on the road in non-conference is never easy. But where things really fell apart was quickly. Week 3, the game against Incarnate Word, 24 players out because of COVID protocol, and then in the game they lose one of their starting defensive backs, Jordan Mask, due to targeting. So they were razor thin at several spots, facing a good FCS team in UIW that'll be in contention for a Southland title, maybe an FCS playoff run this year, with a quarterback that, all due respect to UIW, probably shouldn't be there. And you have to tip your cap. They played well. They won the game. But the COVID issues lingered into the next week. Only a handful of players had come back. And those that didn't have any practice reps. And so they kind of went into Eastern Michigan with a loss before the game was even played. And so you get out of non-conference 1-3 off an FCS loss, not feeling great. But then conference begins with a come-from-behind win over South Alabama in quadruple overtime. So you kind of think, okay, new season, it's a conference year. This will spearhead things in the right direction. And then against Troy, 3 really good quarters turned in against the Trojans, specifically from the quarterback, Brady McBride, arguably for me, the 3 best quarters he's played in his career. And then maybe he had his worst quarter ever in the 4th. 3 consecutive interceptions in that 4th quarter, one of them a pick 6, the final of which they never got the ball back, 6.5 minutes to go. And I really felt that loss carried over into the road swing against Georgia State and then against Louisiana. Lost 28-16 at Turner, a game that was a 5-point game going to the 4th quarter. And they just couldn't muster enough against a good Panther team. Give Sean Elliott credit. They played well this year. And then Louisiana's a buzzsaw, as we all know, and Brady McBride out available for that game. He'd gotten hurt in the Georgia State game the week prior, and they tried to have a conservative game plan, hope that would shorten the game, lessen the amount of Cajun possessions. But when you turn the ball over and when you can't convert on 3rd down, you're going to give them possessions. And 45-0, and it was a loss that Jake Spavital himself called embarrassing. It led to a statement from the athletic director, Don Coryell, about the state of the program. So to the team's credit, they were able to overcome all that and beat a ULM team, which, yes, had been blown out the week before, but had beaten Liberty, beaten Troy, beaten South Alabama. So ULM, came in, a pretty good opponent, and Texas State was able to hold them off and beat them with Tyler Vitt at quarterback. So, for them, the final 4 weeks of the season, very important. One, for this coaching staff, you don't know what the future may hold.
Yeah.
And two, to get just some momentum going. Now they have to win out to become bowl eligible. That's going to be tough, having to go at Coastal next week. Certainly Georgia Southern's always tough to prepare for with the option. In Arkansas State, you never know. But, if they can string together some wins, I think that would mean a lot. Let's look at this fact. If they win any of the final three, that would give them the fourth win of the year. They haven't won more than 3 games in 7 years. That seems like a very small victory, and not that anybody's going to throw a parade at 4-8 or 5-7. But when you've been going 3-9 and 2-10 for the last 6-7 years, it's something. So these games certainly, carry some weight to them. Even though for most, you look at 3-6, you feel like it's a lost season. But for this team, these final 3 weeks, very important.
You talk about Brady McBride going down against the Georgia State Panthers, not available the last 2 weeks. Tyler Vitt comes in. He's the offensive player of the week this week in the Sun Belt Conference, 262 yards and a touchdown against ULM. What has that transition kind of been like? I know Brady McBride kind of been the guy for you guys, but what's been the transition between McBride to Vitt the last couple of weeks, and then what do you see going forward?
Well, there was a lot of competition for the job going into fall camp between Vitt and McBride and Ty Evans, a newcomer in from NC State. And I think the race came down to McBride and to Vitt, and ultimately McBride won out because it's strange saying this now because of what we've seen in regular season play. He wasn't turning the ball over as much in fall camp as Tyler Vitt was. Now we've seen 3 games where McBride has thrown 3 interceptions in each. And in the latter 2 of those, the interceptions came on consecutive possessions against South Alabama and Troy. But the offensive line has struggled a little bit this year. And so protection, with it being an issue, whoever is at quarterback has to be able to get out of the pocket to make plays. Otherwise, you're going to get murdered by opposing defensive lines and blitzing linebackers. And so Brady, of the 3 quarterbacks, the only one capable of really getting out of the pocket and making plays. Not that Vitt is immobile, but he's better as a downhill runner than he is a perimeter runner. Like McBride can get out on the edge and make some plays, whether with his feet or throwing on the run. So they're definitely some different styles to them. Now, I would not call Vitt a pocket passer by any stretch, and Brady certainly isn't one. But McBride is a little more ambitious, I guess is the best way of putting it. As a quarterback, which can be a detriment or an advantage, Vitt is a little bit more conservative. And he did a really good job of simply protecting the football against ULM. Didn't turn it over once. There were a couple of throws that could have been picked off, but bottom line, he didn't turn it over against ULM, and that was a big plus. And so I would imagine that given the fact he won his start, won Sun Belt Player of the Week, you're probably going to see him start again Saturday against Georgia Southern. Yeah. It's kind of funny you ask about both because, as you guys recall, in the game last year at Paulson, both played, and it was Vitt who started, turned the ball over twice. I think he also maybe fumbled too, so I think maybe 3 turnovers by Vitt. Then he got hurt in the game. McBride comes in after he had been benched 3 weeks prior and plays really good football. So good, in fact, that he then takes over starter the next 2 weeks in the season and to start this year. So that's a little bit on the background between Vitt and McBride. Vitt has been here since 2018, McBride since 2019, so they both know the system really well. And I think there's a chance, so you could see both of them at some point in the game against Saturday.
I'm a big Spav fan, and I look at the record and I see 8-25, and it hurts a little bit because I think he's an outstanding guy, and I think he knows ball, and I think that if he's given a chance, it is going to work out. But of those 8 wins, 3 have been each of his conference openers, which is a crazy stat to think about. But from you having seen so many games, what has kept this team from sustaining that momentum from the start of conference play in his 3 seasons?
God, that's a great question, Danny. You know, you look at the what's funny is that the first 2 years, the game after the conference opener wasn't a conference game. So in 2019, they played Georgia State, beat them in triple overtime. The next game was an FCS opponent, then a bye week, and then they continued conference play. And then last year, after they played ULM, they went to Boston College, and they arguably should have won that game. They held a lead for almost the entirety of the game, led by 2 touchdowns in the second half, couldn't quite hold on. Boston College didn't claim his first lead until they made the game-winning field goal with 4 seconds to go. But they played good football the week after. In both instances, they won their FCS game in 2019. Again, they played toe-to-toe at Boston College. And then this year, again, they played good football against Troy in that second game until it fell apart in the fourth quarter. And it seems like when things go bad for Texas State, it snowballs. They have a hard time getting up off the mat. There was some doom and gloom a little bit this past week. You know, while they led for majority of the game against ULM, there were 2 plays that could have put the game away that didn't go their way. There was a dropped pick 6. It would have been an easy 60, 70-yard return for DeJordan Mask. I mean, it hits him between the 1 and the 3. Yeah. Granted, he's in the air when the ball lands in his chest, but, like, it's a play you got to make. And ULM is driving. And because of the drop pick, they kicked a field goal. They missed it, but you felt like we're going to look back at that play and say, that's why they lost. And then later in the quarter, Vitt underthrows a wide open, I say wide, misses a receiver that had an angle for a wide open touchdown, where again you say that's a play that's going to cost them the game. Ultimately, they made enough plays to finally pull out a win. But it's hard to really put your finger as to why when the chips are down, they have a hard time getting up. You used the term earlier, talking about stacking days, stacking wins, referencing, I think it was Ransom for Georgia Southern, your quarterback. This team, now that they got a win, they've got to be able to carry that over, and stack some days themselves and stack some wins. I hate for it to come at the Eagles' expense because I love you guys and love your program, but each team wants to win. For Texas State, this is a very important, game for them just to prove it that they can be a consistently good football team at times because they've been plagued by inconsistency. It seems like now for 6-7 years.
He's such a sweet boy.
We love Brant. Needs to come visit his Metter family. But we've talked about it the last couple of weeks.
Crazy.
We've talked about it really the last couple of years, how Jake Spavital has reconstructed this Texas State roster, so many transfers in, and you've got so much talent on the offensive side of the ball to go along with McBride and Vitt. You've got guys like Banks, Barbie, Graham, so many different weapons that they can go to. What's been the biggest thing in them getting acclimated to what Texas State football is?
Well, you said it. I mean, like, a lot was made about Texas State's approach to the offseason and recruiting. That certainly raised a lot of eyebrows, not just in the Sun Belt, not just in Texas, but nationally, to have a team exclusively use the transfer portal for the recruiting class, because it's not typically how you build a program or build a foundation for one. So the way that Jake Spavital looked at it was, have they gone the traditional high school route, the roster would have been 90% underclassmen this year, freshmen and sophomores. And as you guys know, in the Sun Belt, experienced teams are the ones that win. You don't get the 5-star, freshmen who take the world by storm unless you're Grayson McCall, I guess. But typically you need a year or two under your belt in the Sun Belt, no pun intended, in order to be a solid player in this league. It's rare that freshmen come in and make a huge impact, especially at non-skilled positions. I think you could find stud freshmen at quarterback, like I mentioned with McCall, running back, receiver. We've seen it. But offensive line, defensive line, it seems to be like you need experience up there. And they were lacking that, certainly in the offensive line. Defensive line, they needed depth. That's one thing that's really plagued them. If you were to look at the on-field reason as to why Texas State football has struggled so much since their last winning season, it has been play up front. I forget the exact number now, but their sack ratio, I believe, since 2015 is somewhere around -7. They can't get after quarterbacks. They've had trouble protecting their own quarterbacks, stopping the run, establishing the run, whatever the case may be. So they brought in a number of players in the offensive line to shore things up there, brought in an experienced O-line coach in Jim Turner, whose last job was with the Cincinnati Bengals. Defensively, that is some depth up front there as well. So I think that, the skill players you mentioned, Marcel Barbie and Javen Banks and players like that in the run game with Jamil Jeter and Calvin Hill and at times Brock Sturgis, I think they fit in the system fine. I think that they like to be a part of this offense with Jake Spavital, who has such a great offensive background. I think it's been a bigger issue in just making sure the protections are right, and whatever that offensive line does its job, and I'm not laying the 3-6 record at their feet. That's not fair to them because I think they've shown a lot of improvement this year. But whenever the offensive line does its job and this offense, works within the system, then they can be very successful.
Defensively, could talk about Sione Tupou's passing arm because of the fake punt last year in Statesboro, but I'm not going to do that to you. I do, though, really like Jordan Revels, and Spav actually talked about this on the teleconference earlier today in the second half because he had to come back from the targeting call against Louisiana. Once they went to a 4-man line, Revels tore up the Warhawks O-line. I think you guys had 5 second-half sacks. It really looked like he controlled the line of scrimmage as part of that victory.
Yeah, I seem to recall, the broadcast that Keith Moreland, my analyst, and I were talking about it and what a big difference maker he was going to be in the second half. I didn't realize it was going to have that much of an impact.
Yeah.
Now, you can certainly tell that the game plan changed at halftime. In the first half, Texas State played almost exclusively coverage. They would drop 8 in coverage, especially on second and third and longs, only rush 3. And Chandler Rogers, a good young quarterback in this league, a freshman for ULM, was picking them apart. So when Rebels came in, they then went to more of a 4-man front and mixed in some exotic blitzes, but let him be the guy that spearheaded, the rush. And they were able to get after Rogers. They had 7 sacks all season going into that game, 7, which was tied for second fewest in the country. They had 5 sacks against ULM, and I want to say all of them came in the second half. And the defense won that game in the second half. Texas State's offense only scored 7, and that was an Olay 7.
Yeah.
ULM wanted them to score
to
get the ball back late in the game. So the offense really struggled to stay on the field. The defense is what won the game in the second half, and really a lot of that was due, in fact, to Jordan Revels. Funny story about him. Played at Galena Park North Shore, which is a great program in the greater Houston area, and this was a 2018 6A state title game. 6A is the largest class in Texas. And Revels was a defensive lineman and in high school as well. He was not only was he the MVP of the 6A state championship game, they drew up a gadget play for him on the goal line where he caught a touchdown pass. So very athletic player. He's not the biggest guy, but he brings a lot of energy, and if they're ever going to get after opposing quarterbacks, he has to be a part of the equation.
Got a question coming in on Facebook Live. I think you're our first guest that has gotten a question.
Wow.
I wonder why.
He gets a question before we get a question.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because more or less we just get comments.
Well, we got a question earlier. We'll get back to it. It has to do with men's basketball.
Okay.
But TJ McCutcheon asking, from the Texas State perspective, what's the thoughts on the Sun Belt expansion? I know it's a little bit different for the West Division because 3 of the 4 teams that have joined the Sun Belt are going to be on the eastern side.
Right.
Going to send South Alabama and Troy your way. But what does the Sun Belt expansion look like from the Texas State side of things?
That just means more Barry McKnight for me, so I'm good with it. No,
by the way, Trojan Talk is starting. I just got the notification.
Saw that too.
So, as far as football is concerned, Texas State was on an island to begin with. As we all know, UTA doesn't play football. So there's not a huge impact on the West in that aspect, unless you talk about the addition of Troy, which means that assuming the scheduling will be you play all your divisional opponents every year no matter what.
Yeah.
Now that means playing Troy every year. I like the additions. I think that it's good geographically. I think James Madison brings a lot. You guys are a great example of what a successful FCS program can do with the Sun Belt. You had immediate success when you joined, and you've been a very good program, not this year withstanding. But Appalachian State, same deal. Coastal Carolina was a great FCS program. It took them a while to get their feet underneath them, but they've proven to be a good make a good successful transition of the FBS into this conference. So I think we'll probably see the same pattern there with JMU. Southern Miss football has been down, but we know when it's good, it's really good, and it's an engaged fan base. I don't know a ton about Old Dominion football. I know that they're still relatively young, joined in 2009. They've had pockets of success. I think it was, 4 years ago, they beat Virginia Tech at a home game there. Won 10 games, I think, in 2016. And we all know about Marshall and their history. So I think that these are all really good additions. Obviously, it's going to impact the East more than anybody else. So you guys get a chance to probably see those programs every year. From the Olympic sports standpoint, that's where things kind of get dicey as far as Texas State is concerned. Nothing's been official yet, but the writing appears to be on the wall that the days are numbered for UTA and for Little Rock. And I hate saying that because UTA is a great travel partner with Texas State. Yeah. There's mutual respect between the two schools. It's not, a travel partner rivalry where there's bad blood between the two of them.
Yeah, you guys actually like each other.
And there's a lot of people over there, UTA I like. So assuming that's where things are headed, I'll be sad to see them go. And so there will no longer be a geographical partner, with Texas State. So where does the rivalry come from? I mean, I think there could be a natural one, in the East. I can see JMU getting into some bad blood with you guys or with the Carolinas or whomever, and same can be said for JMU and Marshall. Old Dominion, I'm not sure. I guess we'll see. But for Texas State, you look at Louisiana as they have each other. The Alabamas will have each other. I guess us at Arkansas State are going to have to start hating each other because we have nobody else to hate. So overall, though, I think these are really good additions for the league and makes it stronger. Scheduling is the thing I'm most curious about, especially because two schools are losing travel partners in Arkansas State and Texas State. But I'm excited. I really think these are strong additions, especially because this is a football-centered move. And these are four very good football programs with good foundations.
You talked about it. It's been a while since Georgia Southern has been to San Marcos on a Saturday. What can people coming out to San Marcos, making the long trip out from Statesboro? I know there's a lot of alumni out in the Dallas area making the trip down to San Marcos. What's the atmosphere like around Bobcat Stadium?
The tailgating is great. The issue has been getting people to come from the parking lot into the stadium. I know that we're not alone in that. That student attendance across the country has been down, and it's hard to get people to come into games, and we're no different. When this stadium fills out, the atmosphere is awesome. There were 28,000 here for Baylor. That was an easy sell. Season opener, in-state team, a Power 5 program, and you could travel easily from Waco down to San Marcos. But there have been other games, too, over the years. Navy, Houston, UTSA, Texas Tech, several of those outside of Navy, of course, so all in-state. So, it's easy draws. But all those games had 30,000 plus. And so when it fills out, it's an incredible environment. You could probably say that about any stadium, yes. But this is a beautiful facility that just needs people in it. There's a lot to do in San Marcos, as you guys well know. There's a lot of great local spots to grab something to eat. In Texas, we're known for, in this part of the state anyway, good Mexican food, good barbecue, good burger joints. There's a lot of good places to go. The Square in downtown San Marcos. If you come for the weekend and not just the day of, if the college setting isn't, to your liking, you can go north on 35 to Austin. You can go south on 35 to San Antonio. We are centrally located, and it is a great college town. Student body of 40,000. But again, when the team is winning and the place draws more people, it's very intoxicating. I hate to bring this up because I know that Georgia Southern fans hate it, but the 05 playoff run drew sellout crowds. Easier to sell out then because the stadium only held 16,000, but But there were lines out the door to get tickets for all those playoff games in 2005. And the community, there's just galvanized around that time. When they were competitive in the FBS in 13 and 14, the crowd showed up. When you're going 2-10 and 3-9, especially when you get to November, it's hard to bring them in.
Yeah.
I would love there to be a great atmosphere on Saturday. I don't know if we'll get that. But, Georgia Southern fans, please come. We need bodies in there, and, hopefully, there'll be somewhat of an environment come Saturday.
All right, final question I've got for you, and it's something that Russ brought up on the Ford Locker Room wrap-up last week. Is it San Marcos or San Marcos?
Marcus. Now, what's funny, though, is that someone actually on social media pointed out to me that there is Hispanic heritage to the name of the town. And so because of that, they believe that it is in fact San Marcos, but nobody calls it that. Uh-huh. And I would, I don't want to disrespect anyone by pronouncing it incorrectly, but I've never heard locals call it San Marcos. And I've been down here for such a long time. I only know it as San Marcos. So I'm going to lean that way. But talk to me again in a year or two, and maybe things will change.
That's what I went through. I got the league. Strahan. How do you say that?
That I can tell you was 100% Strand. That was the gentleman's name.
I don't know that I ever heard that conversation.
No, you and I had it 6 years ago.
Well,
one of the first things I was told when I got into this, whatever this is, by Bill Culhane. by our good old friend Bill Culhane, was that it's not Strahan, it is Strand. One of the grandfathers, I guess you call that, of Southwest Texas athletics, Oscar W. Strand, helped found athletics here. Coached multiple sports, basketball, football, so some others they played back in the 20s, and so it is Oscar W. Strand.
Any shot Bill makes the trip down?
He will be there, 100%.
Wait.
He will be there.
Wow.
Just so
this just made my Monday a lot better.
I don't know if Bill's going to watch this, okay? But there's something planned for him on Saturday. I'm going to leave it at that.
Oh, I'm so excited now.
Wow.
Can we go to Texas now?
Okay. All right. I got you.
Brent, really appreciate the time. Really looking forward to being able to catch up on Saturday. It's been far, far too long, but appreciate you joining us, bud.
Absolutely, man, and highly encourage your fans to pull Danny's radio broadcast up and turn me down.
No, that's only the ULM people.
Okay, all right.
See you, buddy. Brant.
Yep, see you guys.
Once again, that's Brant Freeman, one of the oh my god, one of the best people in this conference, hands down. But it's going to be Georgia Southern and Texas State coming up this week. A little bit earlier of a kick. I say earlier kind of relatively.
A-okay with that, though.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. That means we're not getting hope at 7 a.m. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Idaho, thanks. 6 years, I've never let that would go.
Lord have mercy. That was awful.
Yeah, let's land in Denver with pork sandwiches. That's a good idea. Anyway, next state. And I had just gotten to know Frank a little bit 6 years ago.
You got to know him a lot after that.
And after a 4 a.m. pork sandwich, you could bet how the rest of that flight went. Sorry.
I'll still never forget. We landed in Denver. Chris Blair was sitting next to me and was asleep. We hit the ground, and it woke him up.
Yeah.
And he goes, man, are we back already? I was like, no, we're stopping in Denver to refuel. He was not happy. Let's leave it at that. But a 3 o'clock kickoff Eastern Time, 2 o'clock Central will be on the air with the Cutwater Tailgate Show at 1 o'clock Central, 12 o'clock noon Central. 1 o'clock Eastern, I should say.
You have it now.
I've got it.